Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Lowe's knows when you're looking for reliability, the right brand makes all the difference. And now, Lowe's is the exclusive home improvement retailer for the Whirlpool water treatment line, including their Wi-Fi softener, under-sink filtration system, and more. With Whirlpool's proven performance and our everyday low prices, better tasting, better quality water is within reach. Shop pro-trusted brands like Whirlpool and more, in-store or online. Lowe's, we help, you save.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. Well, you can't blame me for being somewhat obsessed with the Russian collusion hoax. After all, it turned my life upside down. It bankrupted me and my family. We lost our home, our savings, my car, my insurance, and actually my ability to make a living because a federal judge unconstitutionally gagged me so I couldn't even defend myself in any medium at all, radio, television, cable, social media. And of course, it was all a fugazi. In other words, once they got two different federal judges to allow a search warrant to inspect all of my emails, text messages, phone calls, and to interview virtually everyone I knew and had worked with for a 20-year period, and they could find no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime. They conjured up this fraudulent claim saying that I had lied under oath in my voluntary testimony before the House Intelligence Committee. But how can one lie about something that never actually happened? The judge in my case, Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who frankly is both mentally deranged and extraordinarily corrupt, said, and I quote, "You have been convicted of lying to cover up for President Donald Trump." To which I say, cover up what? The Russian collusion? See, it's now all completely out in the open thanks to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Just weeks ago, she declassified documents that indisputably prove that Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, the Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, Campaign Manager for Hillary Clinton John Podesta, Acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and yes, indeed, folks, Hillary Clinton herself were involved in the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, nothing less than a massive abuse of power in which they used the full authority of the United States government and the incredible capability of our intelligence agencies to try to utilize two pieces of what they knew were fabricated evidence, the so-called Steele dossier. That was a fabricated report paid for and commissioned by Hillary Clinton's campaign that claimed that Donald Trump had cavorted with Russian prostitutes while visiting Moscow as a private businessman and was therefore compromised. And also the false claim that the Democrat National Committee had been the target of an online hack by Russian intelligence, a claim for which there is no proof or evidence whatsoever. Robert Mueller even indicted 17 Russians in this alleged hack, a case that never even went to discovery. But then his prosecutors ruled that I had to be tried before Judge Amy Berman Jackson because my case was related to the case of the alleged 17 Russian hackers. In fact, prosecutors promised Judge Jackson that they would produce evidence against me that was gleaned from search warrants in that case, which they never did because no such evidence existed. It was not a great period of time in my life, yet I have no regrets. You see, they arrested me in an over-the-top raid at my home at 6 o'clock in the morning for the first time nonviolent crime of allegedly lying to Congress under oath. My home was stormed by 29 SWAT-clad, night goggle-wearing FBI agents brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, when they simply could have said to my attorneys, with whom they had communicated the day before, that I should turn myself in. But that, of course, would not have made that made-for-television moment because, as I think the world knows, CNN had a camera crew a mere 25 feet from my front door. CNN got an award from the White House Correspondents Association for their incisive investigative reporting that determined that I would be arrested on that exact day and time. But interestingly enough, I was arrested at 6:06 in the morning. At 6:11, a producer from CNN sent a copy of my sealed indictment to one of my lawyers by text. And the document she sent had no time stamps, no time markings. That's because it was not unsealed until 10:30 that morning. So how could CNN have such a document? Well, if you went to the metadata tags on the document, you see it was written by Andrew Weissman, the man who leaked the document in violation of law. You see, leaking a search or an arrest warrant is a felony. But the judge in my case didn't care, nor did she care that the jury forewoman in my case, who said during jury selection and during the trial that she was unfamiliar with my case, didn't know much about me, but she had been attacking me and Donald Trump by name on both her Twitter and Facebook postings for 19 months prior to her being selected in the very case that she criticized me for online. But the judge ruled that was not evidence of bias. Now, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, the entire scandal is broken over. This is not investigative journalism. This is not speculation. These people are busted. And now Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, who joins us right here on the Roger Stone Show, a little later in the show, has declassified even more explosive documents demonstrating that there was a 6-year fight with a whistleblower inside the intelligence community to reveal the Russiagate hoax. Gabbard said, "This whistleblower risked everything to expose a scandal that subverted democracy." Gabbard also said the whistleblower was threatened by his supervisor in an attempt to keep them quiet, and that the whistleblower was promised a promotion if they would go along. The documents show even more evidence that the Obama administration used the discredited Steele dossier while knowing full well it was false and silenced those intelligence officers who were sounding the alarm. The documents released by Gabbard reveal that Obama's director of national intelligence, James Clapper, and others in Obama's inner circle spoke loudly about the dubiousness of the Steele dossier, but still allowed it to be included in the intelligence community assessment to fuel the Russian collusion hoax, and thus put the United States through 3 years of hell. The IC whistleblower exhausted every avenue to expose this hoax, reaching out to former special counsel John Durham, as well as reaching out to one U.S. senator, but to no avail. It was only because Tulsi Gabbard, who's going to join us shortly right here on the Roger Stone Show, became the director of national intelligence and empowered whistleblowers that this person is now being heard, a testimony to Tulsi Gabbard's effectiveness in her role. As I say, now that the contents of the annex of Special Counsel John Durham's investigation into the origins of the Russiagate are fully known, it paints an even clearer picture of how this conspiracy to frame Donald Trump took place in exact terms. The Democrat National Chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who reminds every man who's been married twice of his first wife, worked with a man named Leonardo Bernardo of the George Soros Open Society Foundation to create the phony Steele dossier. That information would eventually be laundered through the FBI, the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, and then, of course, the fake news media to create a scandal that was devised for the sole purpose of undermining President Trump and the will of the American people. It's funny because these files were found in burn bags by FBI Director Kash Patel in the hidden room at the FBI headquarters. It was sealed off during the days of co-conspirator FBI Director James Comey. Thankfully, due to bureaucratic incompetence and confusion, these crucial files were not destroyed. And here's why it's important. Because these are the documents that prove beyond a shadow of doubt that Hillary Clinton herself not only knew about the plan, but signed off on it. Now they will be used as the basis to put hundreds, if not thousands, of deep state and Democrat-aligned criminals behind bars. The swamp is being drained, and frankly, MAGA should rejoice in response to this incredible, historic breakthrough. Meanwhile, President Trump has fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, Dr. Erica McIntyre, blaming McIntyre for manipulating the jobs report in the lead up to the 2024 elections to try to help Kamala Harris's chances at achieving victory. I saw that Larry Summers, who served in the cabinet of Bill Clinton, saying that it is impossible to rig the job statistics at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But Barry Habib, one of the country's foremost experts on the mortgage and housing markets, is going to join us a little later in the show to tell us exactly how they rigged those numbers. He's actually revealed that right here on the Roger Stone Show many times in the past. There's a pattern where they put out the jobs numbers to try to benefit them politically. It gets huge headlines, and then they wait a couple weeks and they downsize the numbers very, very substantially. They also use seasonal adjustments and other tricks to make the job market numbers look better than they ever were. So President Trump has now fired the woman in charge. Cory Booker is up in arms about it. We're going to talk about him on the show a little bit today because I've decided to take the book I wrote on Cory Booker, Spartacus, the real Cory Booker story, which is out of print right now, and republish it. It's kind of a stunning story of corruption. We'll get into that a little bit later, too. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We've got a lot more political news for you. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial because we'll be right back on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You know, there is nothing more vicious than an internal Young Republican fight. I speak as a former national chairman of the Young Republicans myself. I was elected in 1977 in Nashville, Tennessee at the Young Republican National Convention. The Young Republicans are significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, they tend to be a harbinger of where the party's headed in the future. 1977, I was elected as the candidate who was supporting Ronald Reagan for president. Reagan was subsequently nominated in 1980. But also they provide the foot soldiers for the Republican Party, and with Republican identity growing among younger people, I think this Young Republican National Federation convention this past weekend, once again in Nashville, Tennessee, the very same city where I was elected, is very significant. You had a face-off between the Grow-YR slate, headed by Hayden Paget, the incumbent chairman of the Young Republicans, who I think gives lip service to being a Trump Republican, but was more essentially the establishment Republican choice, and the Restore Young Republican faction, headed by Peter Giunta of the Young Republicans. I supported the Restore faction, as did my good friend Elise Stefanik and others, because we believe that they were more closely aligned with President Donald Trump's brand of America First Republicanism. Now, typical of these events, we had a controversy where there is a dispute over the outcome. It is very clear that delegates that were committed to the Restore slate, that is the more Trump-oriented slate, were improperly unseated by the Credentials Committee, which allowed Hayden Pageant to claim, at least temporarily, a narrow victory. I saw this before under Reagan, in which you have a president who is so popular that even those in the party who really don't care for the president or his policies have to give lip service to his leadership. I think that's what we have here. Will there be a lawsuit over this disputed election? That remains to be seen. But if you look at the states where delegates were unseated, it is pretty clear that somebody wasn't planning to stop the steal, as they say. The young Republicans, this will be talked about for 30 years. We still hold these grudges. Sometimes in the young Republicans, the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing. Meanwhile, the Republican Party of Florida held their yearly banquets award and ceremony this week, giving Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, essentially their Woman of the Year award. President Donald Trump correctly called her the most powerful woman of the world. Frankly, I get sick and tired of the attacks on Susie Wiles. I've known her since 1980, and in every presidential contest, she has always chosen the outsider. She supported Ronald Reagan over George H.W. Bush, worked for Reagan, worked in the Reagan White House. She supported Congressman Jack Kemp over George H.W. Bush in 1988. She supported Donald Trump over Senator Marco Rubio and Governor Jeb Bush in 2016. She very ably helmed the re-election of President Donald Trump in 2024, a feat that people said was impossible. Yet I keep reading that she was a lobbyist for Pfizer. That's a lie. She worked for a company where she was neither an equity holder or a principal, where it was merely a job representing a number of non-pharmaceutical clients, but she never worked for Pfizer. It is a smear. She is one of the most capable, loyal, and effective people Donald Trump has ever had on staff, and frankly, she was the glue that held his presidential campaign together and the glue that helps his president work so effectively. We'll be right back, right here at The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. Joining me now on the Roger Stone Show is Barry Habib. He is the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway, a widely recognized expert on the nation's housing and mortgage market, and a shrewd economic analyst in himself. He was recently appointed by President Trump to the board of Fannie Mae, and he has appeared here on my show, The Roger Stone Show, also at Stone Zone, to critique the Federal Reserve, but also on many, many occasions break down the job statistics when they are released. Last week, President Donald Trump fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, blaming Dr. Erica McIntyre for manipulating the jobs reports in the lead up to the 2024 election to try to help the Democrats' chances of achieving victories. I noticed just minutes ago that Larry Summers said that it's impossible to rig the job numbers. I think our guest Barry Habib disagrees with that. Barry, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Such a pleasure to be with you, Roger, again. Thank you.
Let's jump into this because I know you have strong opinions about it. You have been a longtime critic at the way they roll out these numbers only to get huge headlines and then a few weeks later very quietly restate them. They're always much, much less impressive when they do. This is the same Bureau of Labor Statistics that overstated job growth in March of 2024 by approximately 818,000 jobs, and then again right before the 2024 election in August and September by 112,000. These are not small numbers. So what's going on here?
It's difficult to say. The Bureau of Labor Statistics does have some leeway with something called seasonal adjustments, and they've clearly made some mistakes. But the firing of Erica McTarth, it's a little hard to get her name correct exactly, but I think it's completely justified. Now, not justified because the numbers were off or not justified by one mistake. It's because of a repetition of terrible errors that we all rely upon. People's mortgage payments depend on it. Our debt, our national debt depends on it. Fed decisions depend on it. There's so much, and it's not just the job numbers. They control inflation numbers. So let's be kind of specific here. 3 of the last 4 job reports came in where they made a mistake of over 100,000 jobs. That's a lot. And in addition to that, this percentage on the last 2 revisions shows that they were off by 90%. These are just unacceptable ratios. And I've written to the BLS, I've called into the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, and tried to explain how they can quickly remedy this. And Roger, that's the heart of why she needs to go. It's not because there's mistakes. It's not because this is this is difficult. But there are things that you can do to fix it that are not being done. And when you don't fix things, you have to go. You definitely have to go because you're not improving the situation. And I'd love to just give 2 examples. There are many things that could be fixed, but 2 that could be fixed with a simple keystroke. And this would really alleviate things. So first, on the job numbers. The job numbers depend on something called a birth-death model. It has nothing to do with births of children and deaths of people. It's births and deaths or closures of businesses. You and I have discussed this on the show several times, and the reason why many of these revisions take place and why it's so off is because the birth-death model is horribly inaccurate and unreliable. Now, what this tries to attempt to do is say, okay, we know big businesses, they'll reply with surveys. Medium-sized businesses, we can get some surveys, and we can get some good data there. But small businesses, your dry cleaner, your sandwich shop, these little small businesses, how are you going to capture the data of who they're hiring and who they're firing? It's very, very hard to do. Well, we can lean on ADP, the payroll company, for some of that, which the government can coordinate with. But most importantly, what they try to do is they take a look at businesses that are opening, and they call that births, versus businesses that are closing, and they call that deaths, and then they guess how many people belong to each of these businesses by typical standards. But if you just open a business, it might just be you. Typical might be 20 people working there, so you shouldn't say there's 20 jobs gained. And a lot of times when businesses wind up closing, what happens is that they really wind it down to where there's just one person left. So you oftentimes get this distortion in the numbers, and it certainly does not capture inflection points, which is what's important. So why not take the weighting, the level of emphasis within the report and reduce it? So while there will be mistakes, you're much less susceptible to having these big revisions. It's a keystroke. It's instead of saying, okay, let's put X amount of weight or heavy amount of emphasis in it, let's reduce that because we don't have good, solid data we could rely upon, so let's put less emphasis on it. I mean, wouldn't that be just what a normal person would do? And the current head of the BLS did not do that, did not attempt to do that in her say. The other thing where it was really blatant, and we pay for this every time, is on the inflation front. On the inflation front, we've been getting terrible numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, predominantly because of something we have talked about, and that is shelter. Shelter is the way they measure rents and home values. They turn it into a service, and they measure it as something called rent and owner's equivalent rent. Rent is great because you can get real data, but then they use owner's equivalent rent. And I want to just give you the emphasis that's put on this. 44% of the core CPI number, very important number that the markets look at, 44% of it is shelter. Of that, 3/4 or 33% of the whole number is based upon owner's equivalent rent. Now, Roger, imagine someone that you know that's nice person, owns their own home, and if you were to survey them and say, hey, how much could you rent it for? You think you're going to get an accurate answer? I mean, look, I live, eat, sleep, and breathe this. I'm not so sure how much I could rent my home for, okay? And then never mind the month-over-month change in intricacies. And by the way, have you ever asked someone, hey, how much is your home worth? They're typically going to overstate it. See, this is not going to capture the inflection points that's needed. The weighting on this, Roger, is 1/3 of the number that the markets are looking at. 1/3 of the number that the Federal Reserve is looking at in making its decisions. Now, Jerome Powell, who is not a trained economist, Jerome Powell, who is an attorney, is not wise enough to look through this, which is why he put us in this horrific position that when everybody goes to the grocery store, they're paying so much because of the 9% inflation that he was complicit in. Because instead of saying, hey, you know what, we could see the handwriting on the wall everywhere, that prices were going up, that the numbers were going up, but because this 1/3 of the inflation numbers was being held back in 2021 because people weren't saying that they realized that rents were going up. Because if you ask this nice person who doesn't really understand the market but owns a home, hey, what could you rent your home for? They're not understanding the changes that are going on. They said, maybe it was the same amount. Who knows what they're saying? But the inflation numbers stayed lower than they really were in the real world. And he kept printing money through quantitative easing and keeping interest rates at zero. So that means rates were effectively below zero. No wonder why we got all this inflation. Now, Roger, he's doing the exact same thing in reverse. And what is happening is that everywhere we are seeing pointing down in inflation numbers, or in situations where there is less inflation than to be concerned about, but he has been so stubborn. And the one thing that you've heard him say over and over and over again, that while the job market is solid, he said that hundreds of times. How much egg do you think he has on his face right now? So yes, she had to be terminated for not fixing it. And Jerome Powell has been doing a very poor job in trying to see forward instead of looking backwards.
Barry, I think it was you or the person who pointed out to me that if you look at the two indicators that the Federal Reserve is supposed to take into consideration when determining whether to cut interest rates, inflation and unemployment, today they are either at or lower than they were the last 4 times that the Fed has cut interest rates. So it appears to me like it's not Donald Trump who's acting politically, as every president has when the statistics merited it, urging the Fed to cut rates. All of Trump's predecessors did the same. But it seems to me to be Jerome Powell who's acting politically. I love the analogy that you use all the time. It's like a man driving a car while looking in the rearview mirror. He seems to base everything he does on old data.
That's exactly right, Roger. And the data does lag. And as we are finding out more and more and more from the BLS, which he's rely upon, the data is faulty. So it is old and faulty. What he needs to do, and again, he's not a trained economist, so perhaps he just does not have the ability to do this. But he's beginning to get pressure from other members of the Fed who typically would just fall in line like lemmings, but they've had enough. Governor Waller, Governor Bowman, and we've even heard Chicago Fed President Goolsbee, although he did not dissent at the last meeting, he has spoken up and pointed out some of these flaws in the data and the fact that the economy needs lower interest rates. And the Fed, by the way, Roger, could be accommodative, which means they want to spur activity, or neutral, saying, hey, we're not going to be influencing the economy, or restrictive. We are very restrictive right now. The Fed is 1% above where it should be to be in a neutral stance. Well, 1% costs us $30 billion a year to our economy. It costs consumers on their mortgage. It costs everyone who has a car loan, every business that has a car payment, all because Jerome Powell has led us down the wrong path. Everyone is paying more.
If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Barry Habib, a member of the Fannie Mae Board, Chief Executive Office of MBS Highway. Also, Barry was widely credited with saving the mortgage industry in 2020 from margin calls due to Federal Reserve actions. It was his presentation to the Fed that created stability at a critical time, a historic event. We're proud to have him, and if you'll just stick with us here and not touch that dial, we'll be right back with more of Habib. When we get back, we're going to ask Barry to handicap the Federal Reserve in terms of who the next chairman may be.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This week we had a resignation by one of the Fed board governors. Barry, handicap for us what's going on here.
Well, first, Director Pulte's comments, the criticism of Jerome Powell, the job he's done, have been really spot on. So applaud Director Pulte. He's right on the money for that. With respect to the activity going on right now, it is going to get really exciting. Now, one of the Fed governors always vote, so they're very, very important. There's 19 Fed members, 12 of them vote. The governors always vote, and then there's Fed presidents around the country, and they rotate. The New York Fed president votes, the rest of them rotate 4 seats, okay? So governors have a very strong position. Ariana Kugler, who is currently a governor, she was appointed by Biden, she is vacating her seat. She was supposed to vacate it in February. However, she's a relatively young woman, and she's got to move on with her life. So what did she find? A teaching position at Georgetown that she's going to start in September. So she has to vacate the position this month, which really became a little bit of a surprise, which puts a lot of emphasis on what is going to happen with our future with the Federal Reserve and the next Fed chair. Now, when we appoint a Fed chair, it has to be someone who is currently serving on the board. So this vacated seat, it's going to be viewed very carefully because it is quite possible that the person who's chosen could be earmarked for the next Fed chair position. That's why there's going to be tremendous scrutiny on this, and the markets are going to react very, very carefully with this. I think the markets might react well because it'll probably be somebody, let me just going to throw a name out to you, somebody like a Kevin Warsh, who the markets will like potentially to be the Fed chair. I mean, I think if I were to handicap who would be the next Fed chair when Jerome Powell leaves and steps off of that position in May, I think current Governor Christopher Waller, who dissented at the last meeting, he's been outspokenly critical of the Fed. He was one of the first ones to agree that the data is faulty on the job numbers, and from the BLS, which we discussed earlier. And I think Kevin Warsh would be rock solid. He served on the Fed. He's brilliant. If you read some of his papers, the guy gets it. He was recently on CNBC, highly critical of Jerome Powell and the Fed, and really spoke so beautifully and intelligently on all of these points that I think we need from a Fed chair. Someone who's got the chops, economically, articulate, and able to understand and look through the bumps and look forward and not through the rearview mirror. Now, there are other choices that could be out there. Is Scott Bessent a choice? We know how brilliant he is. He could be a choice, but he's such a darn good Treasury Secretary. And then Council of Economic Advisors, Kevin Hassett's name has been thrown out there as well. All good people, all terrific people. There's a lot of options there, but I truly believe somebody like Kevin Warsh would be a good choice. And then it'll be a horse race. Who would be the pick? Governor Chris Waller currently, who's on the board, or it would be a governor's position for Kevin Warsh. One of those two would be great. Dark horse choice, Michelle Bowman. Michelle Bowman, also a governor, and she also dissented. So she really, I think, kind of a dark horse, but I think, in my opinion, it'll be between Warsh and Waller. And if Warsh is appointed, I think the markets will respond very well, both the stock market and the bond market.
I do think it is entertaining and a little amusing that those many kind of establishment economists who insisted that Donald Trump's pursuit of better tariff deals and trade deals with our trading partners would end up in sky-high inflation, massive unemployment, and a stock market crash, when in fact we have a record Dow, federal revenues are up sharply, and inflation remains relatively low. So Donald Trump was right yet again. Barry, final thought?
Criticized all along the way, Roger. He's brought peace into the world, masterfully handling Iran, protecting women's sports. The big issue.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. I want to remind you again that Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of Intelligence, is going to join us here on the Roger Stone Show shortly. She busted the Russian collusion hoax wide open by finally winning declassification of all the documents that prove that this was a seditious conspiracy by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, Deputy Director of the FBI Andrew McCabe, Acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and many others. The question now, of course, is whether U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi is going to hold anybody accountable, whether she's going to issue criminal indictments. There's a number of crimes on the table here. Seditious conspiracy is one obvious one, but I also think treason is in order. There is no statute of limitations of 5 years on the crime of treason. It can be charged at any time with sufficient evidence. All eyes now on the Attorney General. President Trump has certainly made his position known. He wants to end the two-tiered justice system and rebalance the scales of justice. There are many bad actors who committed criminal acts during the deep state's Russian collusion hoax. Not only was there Robert Mueller, who we now know, in fact, was non compos mentis, that investigation, witch hunt, being run by the most corrupt federal prosecutor in U.S. history, Andrew Weissman, a man who got his start lying to cover up mob murders in Brooklyn, then went on to destroy the Enron Corporation. He keeps pointing to that on TV and in things he's written as the gold standard. He neglects to mention that his convictions were overturned unanimously by the U.S. Supreme Court, which excoriated him for prosecutorial misconduct. He also destroyed Arthur Andersen, their accounting firm, on his way to do it. And, of course, he knew as the general counsel of the FBI that the so-called Steele dossier, which was one of the two most important elements underpinning the Russian collusion hoax narrative, was a fraud. Yet he went along with using it to justify not only the FISA warrants that were used to spy on President Trump and his campaign, but also to rationalize the appointment of silent Bob Mueller. Now we know why he was silent. When he went and testified before Congress, he demonstrated that he was literally non compos mentis. But there was probably no one as corrupt in this entire story as Judge Amy Berman Jackson. In 2013, Judge Jackson rejected arguments from the Catholic Church that Obamacare's requirements that employers provide free coverage for contraceptive services in spite of being contrary to their religious beliefs. Jackson was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. In 2017, Judge Jackson dismissed the wrongful death suit against Hillary Clinton filed by two of the families who lost loved ones in Benghazi. The families argued that Clinton had done little to help their sons and then lied to cover it up. It is also very strange to see the random string of luck in which Judge Amy Berman Jackson was given virtually all of the Mueller gang cases to oversee. The Hill reported in March of 2019 that the many Mueller cases that landed under her realm were as follows. Lisa Clem, Special Assistant to Chief Judge Beryl Howell, perhaps the second most corrupt federal judge in U.S. history, the one who allowed Donald Trump's lawyers to be dragged before a grand jury and questioned in violation of the Sixth Amendment in the so-called documents case, said that Judge Jackson was randomly assigned the criminal case that Mueller brought against my old friend Paul Manafort, as well as the criminal case against 12, I believe it was 17 actually, Russian militant officers who were indicted on charge of conspiring to hack the networks used by the Democratic National Committee. That was in 2016. She was also assigned the criminal case against Alex van der Zwaan and Sam Patten. They were associates of Manafort, also randomly assigned to Jackson. But what's most amazing is my case, because you see, the Mueller thugs argued that my case had to be heard by Judge Jackson rather than being randomly assigned by the court, because they said that there was evidence against me gleaned from the search warrants in the case against the 17 Russian intelligence agents, a case which, by the way, never even went to discovery. A case in which Robert Mueller never had to put up any evidence. That's because he has no evidence. They promised the judge that they would produce evidence against me that they got from search warrants in that case, and therefore my case was assigned to Jackson. But they never produced any such evidence because no such evidence exists. It was in my case that the FBI admitted that they had never inspected the computer servers at the Democrat National Committee. And that they had relied entirely on the assertions of a company called CrowdStrikes that Russian intelligence had hacked the DNC. But the president of CrowdStrikes, Sean Henry, who just happens to have been a former deputy at the FBI to Robert Mueller, testified before the House Intelligence Committee that his investigation of the DNC servers had no proof whatsoever that there was a Russian hack of those servers. Of course, the judge withheld that report from my defense attorneys at trial. My lawyers also petitioned for Robert Mueller's entire unredacted final report, which Judge Jackson denied them. She said she would read the report and give my lawyers the sections of the report that pertain to me. Somehow she forgot the section on page 178 of Robert Mueller's report, long redacted, but now public, thanks to a lawsuit by BuzzFeed. I guess they thought that it would embarrass me. In fact, it exonerates me. On page 178, Mueller admitted that there were, quote, factual barriers to prosecuting Stone because he found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime. Now, 16 members of Congress have signed onto a particular bill of particulars, basically articles of impeachment against Judge Jackson, and we shall see. You see, karma is really a bitch. All right, a shocking report from Revolver News indicates that disgraced former CIA Director John Brennan, the apparatchik who took Obama's orders to frame Donald Trump as a Russian agent, may still actually be in charge of the CIA in Langley. For those unfamiliar with John Brennan, he is, of course, the self-admitted communist who admitted in a government polygraph test that he was a member of the Communist Party, voted for the Communist Party candidate for governor. He's the man who, as the CIA station chief in Riyadh, signed the visas for 4 of the men who became hijackers, attacking America on 9/11. Brennan got caught red-handed spying on a Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture. He was hacked into the internet of the Senate committee staffers. It was also John Brennan who, according to FBI counterintelligence expert John Guandolo, converted to Islam, converted to radical Wahhabism as the station chief of the CIA while in Riyadh. And now it is reported that Brennan protege John Edwards, a man that Brennan hired at the CIA in various roles, a man who brags about vacationing with Brennan, is now being considered for the number 2 job at the NSA. One former senior CIA operations officer said Brennan controlled promotions in the agency and the NSA through former director Michael Hayden for the last 12 years. And after 12 years of seeding the intelligence community, you can permanently alter the complexion and the effectiveness of any federal department. Former CIA operative J. Michael Waller said Brennan's loyalists still run the top levels of the CIA today. The machinery that was put in place during the Obama era to weaponize the federal government against the people is still running the show. According to Eric Prince, the Blackwater founder and defense industry expert, friend of mine, said that about 40% of the CIA should be axed immediately and contracted positions should also be removed. It's time for a top-to-bottom house cleaning, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe must prove himself to be up to this task. The idea that John Brennan, the mastermind of the Russian collusion hoax, the man who, as Tulsi Gabbard revealed in classified documents she declassified weeks ago, also featured in a report by CIA Director John Ratcliffe, it was John Brennan who insisted that the fake Steele dossier be included in the intelligence community briefing for President Barack Obama so that it could be used as the rationale for the counterintelligence operation Crossfire Hurricane. That was the illicit operation designed to undo the 2016 election based on the completely fake claim that Donald Trump had colluded with the Russians, now laid bare by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who joins us right here on the Roger Stone Show shortly. Meanwhile, Trump Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced the Trump administration is putting entities on notice that continued use of DEI practices to grant scholarships, a policy is expected to impact universities as well as K-12 schools nationwide, is to be ended. Bondi said that entities receiving federal funds, like all other entities subject to federal anti-discrimination laws, must ensure that their programs and activities comply with federal law and do not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, religion, or other protected characteristics, no matter the program's labels, objectives, or intentions. So kudos to Attorney General Pam Bondi. Not only has Donald Trump ended the practice of men competing in women's sports, but he continues to fight on the campuses against these DEI racial quota programs. This is very good news for anyone who believes in the Constitution and the equality of man. Anyway, this is the Roger Stone Show. Coming up next, Tulsi Gabbard, the woman of the hour. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. President Donald Trump is keeping his campaign promise and is demanding that Big Pharma reverse their price gouging policies and offer pharmaceutical drugs at an affordable rate to the American people. President Trump sent letters to all major pharmaceutical producers instructing them to bring down the prices for prescription drugs, matching the lowest cost in other first world nations. The administration said the pharmaceutical companies would be given an avenue to cut out middlemen and sell medicines directly to patients, providing they do so at a price no higher than the best price available in developed nations, and that the administration would use trade policy to support manufacturers in raising prices internationally, providing that increased revenues abroad are reinvested directly into lowering prices for the American patients and taxpayers. Between this and Robert F. Kennedy's Make America Healthy Again agenda at HHS, where today he announced that they would no longer be allowed to use mercury as an additive in any vaccination, the Trump administration is taking aim at Big Pharma's supremacy that has taken hold of the Americans throughout the past several decades. It's time to reduce the price of drugs and stop the overprescription of drugs that have caused so many cascading problems throughout our society. Jack Smith, the special counsel who was knocked out because his appointment was illegal, having never been approved or confirmed by the U.S. Senate, is now under investigation himself. This DOJ hack, who is already facing charges that while serving as a prosecutor at The Hague, he took multi-million-dollar bribes, and who led two overreaching criminal investigations against President Trump throughout Biden's term, is now under investigation for his mishandling, in the mishandling of classified documents, which he alleged, and also the false claim that Trump somehow masterminded the January 6th electoral coup. The cases were both eventually dismissed, accomplishing nothing other than putting Smith among the co-conspirators who shamefully worked in concert to destroy President Trump's life. Now, however, Smith is being investigated by the Hatch Act unit, which bars government officers from engaging in political advocacy. It is being argued that Smith's criminal probes against Trump violated the Hatch Act because they were, in actuality, political advocacy for the Biden and Harris team. I think there's a strong possibility that Tulsi Gabbard, who joins us shortly here on the Roger Stone Show, has classified documents that will prove that Smith was coordinating on a political basis with not just the Justice Department, but with the leadership of the Biden and later Kamala Harris campaigns. Quite frankly, Smith should be investigated for violating the constitutional rights of President Donald Trump and all of his colleagues that were systematically committed during his illegal investigations. Violating the Hatch Act is among the least of these infractions. Smith belongs behind bars for the rest of his life, along with Barack Hussein Obama, former CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former FBI Director James Comey, and former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and the rest of those who engaged in seditious conspiracy and treason. I'm very happy to tell, coming up on the Roger Stone Show, an interview that I conducted Friday with Tulsi Gabbard, former four-term Democrat Congresswoman from Hawaii, currently a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, a championship surfer, a crack shot, an incredibly talented American. This is the most political talent I've seen since Ronald Reagan. She's a woman of deep principle, extraordinarily articulate. I know you're going to enjoy this interview, so stick around for Tulsi Gabbard coming right up, right here on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Joining us now is the Director of the Office of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Now, if you are a listener to the Stone Zone, you know that I have been a fan of Tulsi Gabbard since I saw her demolish Senator Kamala Harris, then Senator Kamala Harris, over the latter's record on criminal justice, because as a prosecutor, Kamala Harris put thousands of people in prison for the nonviolent first-time crime of possession of small amounts of drugs, which I think is wrong. And the toughness that Tulsi Gabbard displayed in that presidential debate caught my attention. And it is no secret that I am among those who urged her to support President Trump, that I later among those who urged her to become a Republican, and that I have predicted, this is not a secret, that I believe that she will someday be our first woman president. Not necessarily in 2028, but very definitely someday. So now that I'm finished gushing like a fanboy, Tulsi Gabbard, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Aloha, Roger. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
I'm very happy to have you. You have an amazing career. People may not know that you are the youngest person ever elected to the Hawaii State Legislature, that you today hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, that you served in a combat zone in Iraq with the Army National Guard. You, of course, were a four-term Democrat Congresswoman from Hawaii's 2nd District, but now I think you are providing your greatest public service yet. You have single-handedly exposed that the Russian collusion hoax was exactly that, nothing less than a seditious conspiracy to overturn the election and remove a duly elected president. and you have come with the receipts proving that President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, FBI Director James Comey, National Security Advisor James Clapper, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and many others, including Robert Mueller, engaged in a fabricated hoax to frame Donald Trump as an asset of the Russians. I guess my question is, since you have had the courage to make all of this information public, and this is not supposition, this is not investigative journalism, these are not theories, you have brought hard receipts to prove everything you have said. Have there been any credible threats against you for going after these high-level individuals, such as President Obama?
Roger, that's a good question. I do have a security detail that is assigned to me given the role and responsibilities that I carry as Director of National Intelligence. I also know that they don't tell me about every single threat that comes in. What I am told is there is an almost constant stream. So they fill a very challenging but obviously an important role that I'm grateful for.
Now, I saw this morning that a whistleblower from the intelligence community came forward to you to expose that they fought for 6 years to uncover the Russiagate hoax. They went to every person they could, exhausted every avenue within the system, and they were consistently stonewalled. In fact, they were told if they wanted a promotion, they would keep their mouth shut and go along with the false narrative. Why do you believe that nobody in positions of power would listen to this voice of reason? And does it show systematic problems within every level of the federal bureaucracy?
You know, Roger, the two drivers and motivations that I can think of when I ask these questions of myself, why is it that through so many years of this courageous whistleblower coming forward, did nobody heed his call? Did nobody say, thank you for bringing forward the truth? We will now take action to expose the truth and bring accountability. And two motivations come to mind, and one is connected to your first question about threats. There is a level of fear that exists when you have people like Chuck Schumer. You will remember in, I believe, either December of 2016 or January 2017, issued a warning on Rachel Maddow's show. And I'm just pulling this up here, where he said that President Trump was being really dumb by taking on the intelligence community. Let me tell you, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. This was said in January of 2017. If you read the New York Times op-ed written by John Brennan and James Clapper that was published 2 days ago, one of the first lines that they have in the first paragraph is, we want to set the record straight and in doing so sound a warning. There's a lot of fear. We have other whistleblowers who are coming forward. One was debriefed just the other day, and this intelligence community professional with decades of service under his belt was visibly shaking and emotional, filled with fear and anxiety and nervousness about coming forward and telling the truth about these very same powerful people that we exposed in our documents and their complicity in this conspiracy to delegitimize President Trump in his election in 2016, therefore subvert the will of the American people, and enact what can only be described as a years-long coup against the duly elected President of the United States.
Well, I, of course, have lived this myself. After I was pardoned, Robert Mueller, or more precisely Andrew Weissmann, ghostwriting for Robert Mueller, said in an op-ed in the Washington Post that I had been in regular contact with multiple Russian intelligence assets, when in fact there was no evidence in my trial that I was in touch with any Russian assets. To violate the False Statements Act, your statement must be willful. It also must be material. So while it's true that I made misstatements in my voluntary testimony for the House Intelligence Committee, none of them hid any underlying crime. Very specifically, none of them hid the crime of Russian collusion or any collaboration with WikiLeaks. Not until BuzzFeed sued the U.S. Justice Department were they forced to disgorge Robert Mueller's final report withheld from my defense attorneys at trial. And on page 178, even Mueller could not sugarcoat the fact that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. As I think it was Ray Donovan, who was the Secretary of Labor, falsely accused of a corruption during the Reagan administration, who said, "Where do I go to get my good name back?" These people take no prisoners. That is most definitely true. I am curious about reports that a whistleblower from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency has come forward with information regarding the 2020 election and the disposition of electronic voting machines. Can you yet tell us the specifics of this whistleblower's revelations and what we might expect to hear regarding election fraud, anomalies, and irregularities in the days and months to come?
Sure. Well, this whistleblower came forward, and this is something that I shared with the president during one of our first cabinet meetings. I think it was back in March of this year, about this whistleblower that had come forward very soon after I assumed the position of director, pointing out that in his previous employment at CISA, he was quite shocked at how in the lead up, I think this was in 2019, in the lead up to the 2020 election, he saw documentation that pointed out that there were some vulnerabilities to be concerned about within our election systems, and that the final paper that the leadership at CISA decided to publish intentionally left out that vulnerability from their report. And I think I'm right in saying that the statements around the government in 2020 were resoundingly, this was the most secure election of our lifetimes. Am I correct in that?
I believe that is correct.
So this whistleblower came forward basically saying that what he saw was essentially the very intentional decision by those in leadership to leave out what he viewed as a critical piece of information in the months leading up to that 2020 election. I don't have evidence beyond that speaking to motive or anything else, but the fact that this whistleblower came forward, having worked at CISA, pointing this out was obviously very concerning.
One of the things that is interesting, of course, has been great focus. The Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, released a report several weeks ago that indicated that former CIA Director John Brennan, who I believe is still talking to some in the CIA because many of his people were burrowed deep into that bureaucracy, forced the so-called Steele dossier, which I think he certainly knew. Andrew Weissman, the de facto head of the Mueller investigation, knew back from his days as the FBI General Counsel, was a fraud, was a fabrication paid for by Hillary Clinton, didn't meet agency standards. But now we have much deeper evidence of Brennan's duplicity. Yet he goes on MSNBC and he says, well, the Steele dossier may yet be right. There's no evidence of that. He really is, this guy is unbelievable. He was outraged. Pardon me, I got that wrong. He was appalled several weeks ago when you fired 100, I think it was 100 officials inside the Office of the Director of National Intelligence because they were disloyal to this administration because they leaked like a sieve.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the feigned outrage coming from John Brennan and James Clapper and Susan Rice and others in response to the release of intelligence assessments and documents and emails and personal accounts of the events that occurred then at the end of 2016 and early 2017 that resulted in this manufactured intelligence assessment saying the opposite of what previous intelligence assessments had said. The previous assessments basically said Russia did not have the intent nor the capability to help President Trump win this election. The manufactured intelligence assessment that you're talking about, that John Brennan and James Clapper not only allowed the Steele dossier to be included as a source for this, it was actually, they demanded that the Steele dossier be used, and then they buried it by highly compartmentalizing it in a highly classified intelligence category so that it would be very, very, very hard for anyone to know that they chose to use the Steele dossier, which was already well known to be discredited across the intelligence community, as a source in this document. So the more outraged I see them as they make the circuits around cable news, the more I know that we are over the target, as we say in the military. If this was as nothing to see here as CNN wants us to believe, then these guys would be out somewhere enjoying their summer rather than expressing their feigned outrage and, frankly, lying again to the American people about their actions and their complicity in this massive conspiracy that occurred.
The discussion of the Steele dossier has been extraordinary over the last couple of weeks, but John Durham never addressed the question of the claim that the Democrat National Committee was hacked by Russian intelligence. Now, it was during my trial, the FBI admitted that they had never inspected the computer servers at the DNC, relying on a company called CrowdStrike, a private left-leaning IT company. The judge refused to let us have their report in my defense. But the head of CrowdStrike, Sean Henry, who just happened to be a former deputy to FBI Director Robert Mueller, testified before the House Intelligence Committee that he had no proof that the Democrat National Committee had been the target of an online hack. And the judge would not allow Bill Binney, formerly a very high-level CIA counterintelligence IT guy, to testify and provide forensic evidence that would have proved that there was no online hack of the DNC. Have you seen any evidence that would bolster that conclusion?
I have yet to see any evidence that proves either of these narratives come across my desk. Either the narrative that the Democrats have pushed for a very long time, that Russia hacked into the DNC's email servers and email systems. If you recall, this claim was one of the reasons why President Obama in December of 2016 announced harsher sanctions against Russia in response to this alleged hack. But nor have I seen the opposite, evidence of some other entity, nation state, or others who may have hacked into the DNC system. This is a question that still remains, and we'll see what turns up.
And it is an area that I think should be examined. In my trial specifically, federal prosecutor Jonathan Kravitz, when the FBI was forced to admit that they never inspected the server, he filed a very rare surreply with the court saying that they had additional proof that the DNC had been hacked, but of course they produced none whatsoever. It's because it doesn't exist, in my opinion. Durham, as I say, never addressed this. I hope you have the opportunity to address it as you continue to look at classified documents. When we come back, I want to ask you about this proposal by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who would transfer the authority to declassify documents from the office you had as the Director of National Intelligence to the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, all institutions who created the Russian collusion hack and then lied to the American people about it. We'll be right back with Tulsi Gabbard.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back in the Stone Zone with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and we're very grateful to her for joining us today. Senator Tom Cotton seems to be leading the charge to reduce President Trump's oversight over the intelligence community through his legislation, the Intelligence Community Efficiency and Effectiveness Act of 2025. Now, while this legislation kind of masquerades as a cost-cutting operation, in truth, based on my reading of it, it shifts the authority to declassify documents away from the office you had and sends that power to the FBI, the NSA, and the Central Intelligence Agencies, exactly the institutions which promulgated and then covered up the Russian collusion hoax. You already are moving aggressively to downsize your office as we speak, correct?
That's right. And in some of these areas, there's certainly agreement between the work that we are doing to streamline operations, to find and create efficiencies, save taxpayer dollars, to downsize the organization so that it can actually it can move in an agile and an efficient manner to fulfill the mission that ODNI was created for in the wake of 9/11. And you're exactly right, Roger. ODNI singularly is the oversight organization that looks over these 18 different intelligence community elements. It is the integrating body that pulls together the different intelligence products from these different agencies. We check to make sure that these intelligence assessments are not politicized, that they are not biased, that they are not trying to shift a policymaker's view in a biased way through the assessments. What we need are unbiased, objective, relevant, and timely intelligence assessments to best inform the president as he makes his decisions, as well as other policymakers here in our nation's capital. This is what ODNI was created to do. This is what we're focused on that oversight and integration function. I'm working very quickly towards making it executing the plan that we have built very deliberately. And I think taking away that oversight authority from ODNI would essentially put us back into a position where, for example, you would expect the FBI or the CIA or the NSA to report its own wrongdoing or to report its own incidents of weaponization of intelligence that may be occurring under their rooftop. We can look back in history and see that that is not the case, and that will not be the case, which is why you need an independent, objective body, in this case, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, to fulfill that necessary function for the president and for our country.
I want to thank our guest, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, for joining us today. This has been an extraordinary period in American history, as she has now declassified documents that demonstrate once and for all that the Russian collusion hoax was a seditious conspiracy and an illicit effort to remove a duly elected president. The question now is, will anybody be held responsible? Attorney General Pam Bondi, please do your job. Thank you for joining us. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?